Hello everyone. Today, our guest is Professor Roli Varma from the University of New Mexico. She will be presenting us with the topic of women in STEM. Professor Varma was born here in Montreal, graduated from Dawson College, and received her undergraduate degree in political science at McGill University. Professor Varma, welcome to the show. Could you give us a brief introduction of yourself and your research interests in particular, and why did you choose those research interests to pursue?
Well, there are two ways to present myself. So one is professional. I'm a Carl Hatch Endowed Professor in the School of Public Administration at the University of New Mexico, Albuquerque, US. And my terminal degree is in Science Technology Studies from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Prior to that, I earned two masters, one in same program from same institution, and other in political science from SUNY, State University of New York at Albany. My bachelor is in political science from McGill University. Before that, Dawson, CJEP. I was in health sciences, Canada. And second is somewhat, personal. Uh, I was born in a tiny village in India and moved to a metropolitan city when I was 2 or 3 years old. But I spent almost every summer in the village. And in 1975, I migrated to Canada, Montreal, Canada. And in 1981, I moved to US. And I say this because I have first-hand experience about village life, city life in India, being an immigrant in Canada, and being immigrant in the US. So it's, and of course, being a woman of color. So that adds to, that is my introduction.
Okay.
Was the second part you asked about research interest, or you
Yes,
had?
yes.
Okay, so my research is driven by science technology issues. Um, I moved from a major in health sciences at Dawson College to political science and then to science technology studies. It is because I wanted to study political, economic, and social issues arising out of development of modern science and technology. I think I believe, I study contemporary science and technology issues. I think they have national and international implications. I take a multidisciplinary approach, which means I draw from multiple disciplines. I do my own field work. I collect my own data. And so I have done multiple things, within the broad umbrella of science technology. I have multiple sub themes, and I'm going to mention two here, and then I'm going to tie it. So, first one is, both are pertaining to educational and workforce diversity. So, first one is immigration of Asians. I focus on immigrants, and I think if you look at United States, their immigration has been really significant in terms of numbers, and not only in the US, elsewhere, and a lot more, I mean, since 1965, but a lot more since 1990s. And there is not much known about their role and issue they face as international students or as foreign workers. So I'm really interested in finding out how Asian immigrants have been making inroads in traditionally white male-dominated science and engineering professions. Now, other area is has been representation of women and minorities in information technology, education, and workforce. Now, if you look at IT, there has been rapid growth, and it has impact on productivity, on national economy, and there are all sorts of career opportunities in IT have come about. But women and minorities continue to be underrepresented. in IT education and workforce. So gender and ethnic equity in IT is critical not only for women and minorities but also for um, whole economy. And so I like to study that, and I have also compared women in IT in US and in India, where women are overrepresented in IT education.
And then coming to, before we go on to the topic of IT specifically, I want to touch a bit more on STEM in general. So according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, the definition of STEM can vary depending on who is using it. So what is your definition of STEM and how does that affect your research in particular?
Okay, so I prefer to stick with the word science and engineering um, rather than STEM. Uh, it has to do a lot more with, because I'm not sure how to deal with T technology, and um, it's just a little bit tricky because there is no degree in technology.
Okay.
Okay, you do science, engineering, math. So I'll stick with science and engineering. I don't have any specific definition. Um, I never thought about it until you asked. I think science and engineering, they are taken for granted. We know life sciences, physical sciences, engineering, mathematics, computer science, social sciences. These are all science and engineering fields. And we know if we talk about arts, humanities, literature, maybe management, they may not like that, but they are considered non-science and engineering fields. So it is somewhat easy to identify science and engineering when you are studying. These things are already decided for you. You take biology, you take chemistry, you take mathematics. These are already decided. Um, and it becomes a little bit trickier when you count who is a scientist, who is a mathematician, who is an engineer. Should you use their knowledge? Should you use their experience? Should you use their skill? Should you use their job title? Or should you use their degree? Uh, and you have to rely on numbers, and you have to rely on official numbers, in my view. And so we can look at, like, where do these numbers coming from. And at least in this country, Census Bureau is one source. And basically, US Census Bureau, what they do, they classify people based on some sort of a standard occupational classification. And when you look at federal US federal occupational data, what they use, they classify workers based on the jobs they are performing. And if you look at Bureau of Labor Statistics, they are going to classify people based on what employers are, how employers are classifying. So depending on what source you are using, your numbers are going to vary. Um, I tend to use, just to be on safe side, National Science Foundation data, because I think they give information on both degrees and occupations. Further, they classify workers in, I think, three categories. Uh, People belonging to science and engineering occupations, people belonging to science and engineering related occupations, and people belonging to non-science and engineering related occupations. So I find that to be very handy for
Perfect.
me. So I just use that. I don't know what definition to use.
Yeah, perfect. No, it makes sense. Makes sense because it's very vague. Any definition is pretty vague in terms of research. We have to define it, and mm,
So, Professor, according to the National Science Foundation, specifically for science and engineering bachelor's degrees, men were awarded roughly 318,000 bachelor degrees in 2014. And in the same year, women were awarded 317,000 degrees, roughly. The number seems to be roughly equal, but how do these numbers actually translate into the STEM workplace?
Oh, well, I think numbers you will find, even though you're talking 2014, even if you look at latest, uh, numbers will be more or less equal. I mean, difference is insignificant. I think if you define science and engineering workforce based on science and engineering occupation, uh, in the United States, you will get number to be close to 7 million, between 6 and 7 million. If you define based on people holding science and engineering degrees, I think you will get number close to 23 million. Um, and if you define science and engineering workforce by expertise used in the job, I think number will be around 18 to 19 million. These are NSF numbers. I am not exactly sure precise, but they are close to this thing. So basically, what it is telling that not all science and engineering degree holders work in jobs which are designated as science and engineering occupations. Second thing it tells, though people are not employed in job classified as science and engineering occupation, but their jobs do require expertise in science and engineering, even though they may not be working, as science as a scientist or engineers. And in other words, science and engineering knowledge and skills are quite widespread. They are just not limited to uh, jobs classified as science and engineering.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Um, what I was trying to get at more is that, like, both men and women are fairly equally represented in the number of bachelor degrees that they hold, right? But um, people still talk about a gender inequality in the STEM workplace. So, why does this exist?
Yeah, I think there are multiple reasons, and we will come back to that. But in terms of we look at numbers which you gave me, um, women I think uh, make make around 28% of science and engineering workforce. So there is a gap. You know, uh, they are almost. I think there are almost 40% of employed individuals whose degree is in science and engineering field. But when it comes to science and engineering occupation, they are around 28%. Okay, so in other words, it gets tricky. Like they may not be in those occupations. That doesn't mean don't use that knowledge which they have acquired. And now, why that is the case, you know, we can just go over and over.
Yep, understood. So I guess there was really just a people holding the degrees and also might go into jobs that require the knowledge in science and engineering, but does not necessarily qualify as a science or engineering job. Am I correct? Okay, perfect. Then come back more to the statistics side of it. So according to the same source, so National Science Foundation (NSF), in 2014, only around 10,000 degrees in computer science degrees were awarded to women, while around 45,000 computer science degrees were awarded to men. So, however, in the same year, women were awarded around 64,000 degrees in biological sciences, while men were only awarded 44,000 degrees in biological sciences. So, what explains this disparity in women's choice of degrees? Since women are going less into computer science, wouldn't that already explain the disparity in IT jobs for women?
Well, numbers which you are showing, basically it tells that men and women prefer different fields of study, right?
Yes.
Men earn more majority of degrees in engineering, computer science, physics, and mathematics, and women are in psychology, biology, I think agricultural sciences, and social sciences. So when you look at in terms of occupation, women make 60% of social scientists. I think almost 50% or little less than 50% of life scientists. But when it comes to physical scientists, they are only 28%. And when it comes to computer science, I think it's also 28, 26 to 28%. And engineering is really bad, only 15%. So question you are asking why this is the case, and it relate to earlier question, which was being asked why this is the case. I think you have to look at how women came to join science and engineering. Uh, there, there was a very famous quote. I was looking recently. I wrote a paper, so I remember this thing. It is by historian Margaret Roster of Cornell University, and she was writing something in 1969. I mean, it is widely quoted. And she asked a question: Were there ever women scientists? And she was told, no, never, none. And so if you look at like before World War II, very few women had received bachelor's degree in science or engineering. And if they did, they went to all women's college. And further, such opportunities were only available to women who came from white family and very rich family who could kind of afford. Now things change after World War II, uh, uh, especially because there was so much growth in science and engineering. You have computers coming, microwaves coming, penicillin coming, radar coming, satellite, and host of civilian technology. So suddenly, science and engineering, which no one paid attention to, and it became, it's a new image. It became so important. But then also after World War II, something happened, in my view, which is Soviet Union. They launched Sputnik, and as soon as they do, I think it is 1957, sometime in October. And as soon this happened, US, which is emerging as a superpower, or was already a superpower after World War II, because there
Yes.
was a gap was created, and they felt that, oh, we are weak. How could we be weak? And that is especially compared to Soviet Union. And so US government started pouring money into science education on very very large scale. They have been pouring money, but it just became too. It was just became so huge. So there was some sort of an act, National Defense Education Act, I think, which came soon after Sputnik, and they focused on education in mathematics, science, and foreign language. It was very very important, and that opened door for women to study science and engineering. And then you have women's movement, and they started encouraging uh, uh, more girls and women to go in science and engineering. So wonderful thing was created. So health sciences were obvious choice for women since they were seen as a caretaker before that. They were not studying, they were caretaker. And they were needed as doctors, they were needed as nurses for women's healthcare issues as well as childbirth. So what I'm saying that field choices are based on multiple factors. But in my view, most important one is what society has historically created what is good for women. And many women have broken that path. That is why we see women in multiple other fields, even though numbers are not there, what we would like to see, but they are there. So it only says we have a long way to go.
Okay, understood. But so do you think that the disparity in computer science degrees, just talking about degrees, not talking about jobs here, is due to the society's past historical context, whether other than right now, we would say, according to again from the same source, we can see pretty much gender equality in terms of science and engineering degrees. Do you think that the choice in computer science degrees due to women's own volition of choosing, or do you think it's the society's historical context?
Okay, so I am going to cite a study to answer this question. I think it would be a little easier. I think there was a book published by I believe Computer Boys Take Over. I think that's the title of the book. I think it is by a historian, Nathan Ensmenger. I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name. So, till 1960s, after World War II, uh, computing was seen as a natural choice for women, especially for young women. And I think he cites a magazine, Cosmopolitan magazine, uh, which was promoting that, encouraging people, writing an article that women should pursue degree in computing. But more interesting example is in 1940s when women were hired. I think there were 6 women which were hired uh, for to run ENIAC, ENIAC machine, which is considered world's first electronic computer. And these 6 women were known as ENIAC girls. And they were hired because women were typists, they were telephone operator, they were they were just clerks. And so it was assumed that this is a very low level position, computing, and this is a natural progression for women. If they're typing and taking a phone call and plugging things, they can go on and continue to do that. And at that point, hardware, according to him, hardware was like, machines are men's area. And they thought that that's where men should be. That is more brainy thing to do, more challenging. And but what they didn't know that software will take over hardware. So as soon as that happened, I mean, at that point, when you say ENIAC girls, you're not talking about geeks at all. That's not computer girl computing coding. Uh, so computer hardware were reserved for men, and computing software was reserved for women. And now what you see, it has changed. Suddenly, so when software was considered less important, less masculine, it was for women. When software became more important than hardware, then suddenly you have a shift that software is in men's domain. And suddenly you see emergence of geek culture. This is for men's, and it's not, it requires a lot more mathematical mind. It is a lot more brainy. It is the job. So suddenly that shift has been created by society. Um, we did not know, you know, when we when we were not living in computer era, women were in computing. As soon as we started living in computer era, it was taken by men, and women are not in that field.
Okay.
Wouldn't you?
Okay.
So it's like almost like conspiracy done by men that because they wanted to make a shift from hardware to software.
Okay. So you think it's the society's historical context that influences the disparity in computer science degrees?
Uh, that's what I think.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. Then I'll give it to me and Jessica.
Yeah, okay. So our next question is what is the glass ceiling? And how much of it is systemic and how much of it is simply biological or based on self-interest?
Well, glass ceiling refers to artificial ideological barriers that stop qualified women from advancing to high level position, mostly administrative position or senior position in public and private organization. And these barriers are considered artificials because they have little to do with education, skills, qualification, and competence. But nonetheless, they do obstruct qualified women from going to the next level. Now, the reason it is called glass because things are so transparent. You can see that they can climb. It's visible. And also, I think it is called glass because it is a glass, so you can break it. You can shatter, and you can be bruised in that process, but you break it and you can climb. So I think it's kind of interesting. What I find interesting about glass ceiling that this is the term which became popular in the US after an article which was written by Wall Street Journal, in my view, which is a conservative kind of, money-minded journal. And they talked about describing invisible barriers that women confront as they want to climb a corporate hierarchy. So after that article, in in 1990, 91, 92, around that time, there was a commission was created, Federal Glass Ceiling Commission, and idea was they will do two things. They will identify glass ceiling kind of barriers which women face and other minorities face, and they will also find out successful practices or activities uh, which will deal with these barriers. There are many terms related to glass ceilings have come pertaining to different people. um, kind of Asian, you may people may say, oh, they are facing bamboo ceiling, etc. So for minorities, multiple things are there. Um, okay, so second part is whether it is biological, or whether it is based on self-interest, or whether it is systemic, right? That's what.
Yeah, so to illustrate the point a bit better, so according to British philosopher and scholar Helena Cornin, I think she was writing I think it was a scientific journal, I'm not sure, I forgot. So she used the phrase more dumbbells for more nobles to describe the fact that there is greater variation in male traits, thus leading them to occupy more positions at the top as well as more positions at the bottom. So for instance, if we illustrate this using IQ, it will be um, more men will be be very smart as well as very stupid, while female traits tend to cluster around the average, and therefore there must be necessarily fewer women both at the top and at the bottom. So again, here she is illustrating this point from what Darwin first proposed when he was writing The Origin of the Species. So how do you think, how true is this the case of variance based just biologically in terms of STEM workplace, and how true is this, just in the corporate world in general?
Okay, so I don't know about her. I have not read her work. Actually, I don't pay much attention to kind of biologists. People who link biology and human behavior, I don't pay much attention. I like Darwin only when it comes to his theory about evolution, that we came from monkeys. But other than that, going beyond that, I don't. So I don't know much about it. So, what I could say, whether biology determines human behavior, is very old concept. Earlier, we didn't have science, we didn't have scientific reasoning, but people, you know, there are differences between men and women, and they are because of biological differences. And basically, what it says that women are not really capable of doing science and engineering. So in Europe, long time ago, in Middle Ages, how do you know people are who is more intellectual? And brain. That's so they would measure size of brain. But how do you measure size of brain? Well, okay, let's look at who is wearing larger hat. So if you wear extra large, you are more intelligent. And women were not wearing that kind of large hat, so they were less intelligent. And also, now what has happened, that what we have is we use more sophisticated argument, but bottom line, we just say that it is not in them. Now, my problem is I don't pay attention to this thing, because biology, you are stuck. Nothing, you can't do anything. If it is biology, I mean, what can I do? It is in me. If it is a social environment, inside, outside, we can change. If it is socialization, we can change. If it is training, we can change. But what do you do with biology? So it doesn't interest me, biological arguments. I think they are old arguments. They here and there they do come. I think they are not as explicit now, but they are implicit that only certain people can do science. There was a comment made by Harvard University president, and that women don't have in them, to do mathematics. Well, he had to leave. He was no longer president of Harvard. But these comments are not that crude. They are done. They are conveyed in a little bit more sophisticated way at this point, but they're futile, because you are just saying one group of people, which is half of population of the world, they can't make any changes.
I think you misunderstood my point here. My point is not making an argument. My point is just
no, not you. This is study which you were.
Yeah. Okay. I see. I'm just trying to try to sort of assess the impact of biological differences we have to realize our biological differences. So I'm just trying to assess the impact of biological differences in terms of workplace equality and what we can do about it. So that was my question.
Biological differences, whether they lead to human behavior, that I'm not sure. I mean, I am sure there is no, there are differences, but they don't lead to biology, does not determine
Okay, yeah.
human behavior. That is the argument which she's trying to be making. What was the name you said?
Ms. Helena Cornyn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I find, hard to take.
Okay. I'll pass it on to Ming or Jessica. Yeah, Ming, go ahead.
So another example, sorry, we should clarify this first, I feel. Helena Cronin, she said that there was males have a greater variety of behavior. How much do you think that is biological, and how much do you think it's the way that the socialization of men?
Sorry, Ming, wrong question. Like, she was just stating a point made by Darwin that like male animals biologically have more variance in their traits.
Okay. So it seems like
historically, if you look at, men were allowed to go out. They were allowed to go and study. Women were not. So who is going to have multiple skills, men or women? Women, if they are only staying at home, taking care of their local surrounding, I think I will take biological arguments after that restriction is taken care of. Then we can talk about. But at this point, that does not exist, right? Women have not been given. So how can we conclude that it is because of biology? If women have equal thing, then maybe we can revisit biological argument. But at this point, I don't know if there is. I'll go as far. I don't think there is a scientific basis to say that. Because that condition is not there.
Yeah.
Okay. Then again, not trying to make an argument, just trying to assess trying to understand the issue more clearly. So you said that if we take out the social barriers to women, which of course exist, which we have seen during the Middle Ages leading up to the 20th century, taking that out of context. So for instance, again, we're coming back to the question of degrees. Men and women seem to have received pretty much the same degrees in science and engineering degrees. So considering that, won't you say that it's pretty equal? So now we can consider potentially the biological differences?
Okay, so then the question of fields, right? What it boils down to, they are going in some field and not in other fields. It's not that they are not going, they are not there. I don't know. I mean, I want to bring in my India example.
Yes, of course, please.
Where you see fields, where women are not going in, women are going in. I think we can talk about why women choose certain fields and not choose other fields.
Yes, of course.
But that is not the same. That is not the same argument about biology, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have degrees. They're almost equal. Actually, women might be getting more degrees, but they are going in certain fields. And why that is the case, um, maybe certain fields are, they have opened their arms. They are more welcoming. Maybe certain fields don't open their, they don't welcome. I mean, look at field of medicine, which is very horrible. It's very tough field. You work long hours. If you take this by like, oh, women are very gentle, women are, I mean, caretaking argument is one, but you just see blood, you see all kinds of misery, etc. But that is a very hard field, and they are there. You can look at law profession. It's very demanding profession, and they are there. So it's also possible that these fields have done something which some other fields have not done, right?
Okay.
That would be my argument.
Yeah. Ming or Jessica, any questions?
Yeah. I've also heard the argument that justifies like gender inequality in STEM as being that women become pregnant and that's why they have less experience and that's why they can't enter the field as much. What are your thoughts on this argument?
Say it again. You have heard that a woman get. Uh,
Like there are people who say that the gender pay gap in STEM is because of women taking time off for maternal leave, but I was wondering what you thought about that argument and if there were any studies conducted which compared men's pay to women's pay with the same number of years of experience, but where there still existed a pay gap.
okay, pay gap. There are people who do. I'm not a quantitative person, and but I do know that people are very sophisticated when they make calculation. They make multiple factors constant when they are comparing uh, uh, people's salaries. Multiple things they will make it constant just to make sure that it is a proper comparison. And they would see that that's where you will see that pay gap is everything equal and still there is a pay gap. So there are multiple studies done on that it's the same work is being performed, but there was a woman I interviewed some time ago, and she gave an example of when she took a job. She was told that her salary has to be $5 below that other person's salary. Now, $5 don't make much difference, but the question was that it cannot be at par to men. I mean, $5, come on, everyone can afford. The difference is like annual salary. If you're making 500 and somebody is making $495, that is not a big difference, right? But symbolically, it was that you cannot be at par with this person.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is when calculations are not really naive, they are very sophisticated. They take multiple factors into consideration, and you just say that gap is still is still there. Other argument which you were asking had to do with family and children. That's what you were asking. Um, that problem is very serious. That culture in science and engineering does not go well with raising families. If you want to do well, and you have children, you have I mean, they didn't ask to be there, and they are there, and they require a lot more attention than animals. With after 5 minutes, I mean, they are walking. Look at, uh, uh, and so that is people talk about it, but people have not done anything. So, for instance, look, you are not going to be spring chicken forever. Is as simple as that. And so when you are building your career, that is also the time when you can have your family. And there is no institutional support for that. I don't know why, um, um, like National Science Foundation, for instance, they give money, they give all sorts of things. Why can't they give also money to women for childcare as a part of their grant? They don't do that. Why institutions, uh, they why don't they provide daycare? Once I visited Google, and I had very different image of Google because it's a private sector, etc. And I was shocked that how friendly that environment was. It was like mind blowing to me. It didn't look like a private sector. People could eat, people could play tennis, people can walk, people could sleep, they can have their all sorts of recreational things. They can do laundry. Every single thing was available there. But you know what was the tough thing? Daycare. And what kind of daycare they had, um, it was there was a long wait. I mean, I don't know if Google has changed since, because what I'm talking about 7 8 years ago, or maybe longer. Uh, so suddenly you realize that whole work environment was set up for single young male to work for Google in California. That's what it looked like. So I think they don't do this thing. I mean, child care is an issue. Why can't they set aside some money? Or if they can't provide daycare, why don't they do that? It's mind boggling to me. You know, I think giving 2 weeks or 3 weeks doesn't do any good.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so do you think that daycare and the issue of child rearing would be an issue facing women in IT degrees in IT fields in particular?
Uh, IT becomes in many ways a lot more interesting, because you can work as flexible. You can work from, depending on what kind of job you have. So in that way, I think it is a lot more friendly for family responsibilities, because you can work from home. I mean, come on, during COVID, that's what we are doing, right? Working from home. um, and and I think it is a lot more in IT, that flexibility is in IT than in.
Uh, then just to back up a bit, so do you consider Google as an IT company, or do you think it as a more other type of company?
Well, it is noted as IT company,
Okay,
right?
so, yeah, but you said that they don't provide very good daycare, so but you also said that
At that point, when
at
I
that point,
visited,
yes, at that point.
uh,
So so do you think with the COVID situation or with the change in sort of the workplace to home, basically, do you think that would help women to gain more foothold in IT fields or in STEM fields?
it's okay. I was only making a comparison among science and engineering fields, where I thought there was some sort of flexibility if you are in IT, in information technology, in
Okay,
computer.
okay.
Okay, and that's the only comparison I was making. Now, I think there are multiple studies have come out in last year, And they suggest that because women are staying home, their productivity has gone down, especially in academia, especially in terms of research, because they are home, they are also have to look after their kids because kids are not in, kids are also at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So automatically they become caretaker and they don't have that much time. There are multiple studies that in terms of publication, etc., they are lower for women because of COVID and staying home. So my comparison saying home had to only do with when you are in when you compare different science and engineering fields.
Okay,
I,
okay.
okay. So I want to qualify that.
Yeah, I see. I'll leave it to me and Jessica.
Well, it's very interesting because when you talk about childcare, because I know that in Iceland, in order to kind of reduce the pay gap, what they did was they imposed a paternity leave. So fathers were allowed to go on leave and take care of their children instead of only being women that were allowed. And they saw that that really helped bridge the pay gap. I don't know if you knew about this, but I was just wondering if
No,
you
but
had.
not in Iceland, but in Europe, they do father or they do one parent. They uh, they give longer time period in in multiple European countries. They do that. Germany would be, you will find that to be the case. I just think whosoever stays, I think you become behind anyway. If you come back, science, technology, science, engineering, they change very rapidly. If you are 1 year at home, 1.5 year at home, and you come back, you will be catching up. Kind of average. Some may do very well, but on an average, I think you end up being somewhat behind. So my preference is for daycare. Kind of support than leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like a gardening job. I can take the same pace. I mean, science has changed, and I'm outdated because I am not tuned uh, with that for a whole year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it will. I think impact will be a little bit different. If
Yeah.
I was a plumber, that would not be the case.
Yeah, well, I think since we're talking about your outside of your expertise, um, maybe we could come back a bit to more the corporate side and the obstacles facing women. One which we'll talk about, brought up by Ming, was parental leave and also maternal leave. Sorry. So could you give us some other examples of other obstacles facing women in the science and engineering workplace?
Um, well, uh, uh, there are always obstacles. Um, I think you learn to live with these. You want to go to work. You don't want to say that it is a bad place because that's where you spend most of your time. I mean, if you look at you're working 8 hours, let's assume. Okay, when you are home, you are sleeping for 6, 7 hours. You have little time when you watch TV and you are home, you're cooking and some other thing. So majority of your time is spent in your workplace. That's how you even identify yourself, and you don't want to you kind of adjust. You don't want to say, oh, I'm going to go to this miserable place. You kind of adjust that uh, that this is a this is a welcoming place. This is where I'm going to do my job quite nicely, etc. I think barriers they show up. Um, you go to work when time comes for evaluation, when time comes for resource distributions, uh, when time comes to make accommodations. For instance, would you make uh, meetings 3 o'clock, or would you make meetings around noon time? 3 o'clock, people have to go and pick their kids. Okay, so these are whether you are willing to make those accommodation. And now if people cannot be complaining 100 times. I mean, people don't complain because you want to have a nice atmosphere. That doesn't mean barriers uh, don't exist. um, pay gap uh, pay gap, we already talked about, right? But in other, like, whether there's multiple resources, are you getting, there is a multiple, mentoring, are you having that? um, you should not say that women are good in everything, but they are good in some things. Is Are they recognizing they are good in X, and they are training them for next stage? Those things probably, they don't take place as much. So these are, barriers. And then you kind of, you learn to live with, I suppose.
Okay, and so coming back to so again, barriers and women in positions more at the administrative level. So what are some of the barriers at the, so you talk about the glass ceiling. So you're also talking about women are able to break the glass ceiling. So can you give us some examples of that, and how they are able to do so? Some advice for our women listeners here, and also what are some of the barriers in place at an administrative level that women have to overcome in order to get to that higher level?
Look, women have to, what do they have to do? Um, well, they have to be good technically. Okay. They try very hard to be better than men, actually, if they want to climb. Um, there are multiple mistakes made by men might be ignored. Fewer mistakes made by women will not be ignored. They will be noticed. These are like small things which take place on day-to-day work. What women need to do, I don't know what advice I would have, um, other than we live in a very diverse kind of situation. I think you have to find someone. You have to find someone who's willing to appreciate you. You know, and it's almost, and I think you would be able to find that, um, because not everyone is going to be at the same level. You know, I mean, uh, so you have to be good at what you do, and you have to find, if you are having a problem with your immediate uh, supervisor, you want to make sure there are other people who appreciate your work. Um, there are, there is literature which talks about networking, that there should be like women groups, and kind of a support they provide, kind of things they talk, uh, which would tell them that it is not only their problem. It is like a group problem. And so these support groups are very, very, I don't want to say support group, but mentoring networks for women. They are supposedly very helpful. Things which you don't get within organization, you can get that kind of help, that kind of training. You can get from them.
Yeah. Okay. And me and Jessica, any more questions? If not, I guess we'll finish it off.
I do have one final question.
Go ahead.
Professor, would you happen to know the concept of a glass cliff?
Okay, so glass cliff is something like when women are promoted to a position, glass cliff, you are promoting women to be at top. When chances are very high they may fail. Not all of them, but some may fail, but chances are very, very high. And women are kind of desperate because they have not had opportunities. They take these challenging positions. Some do succeed, but many don't. And then it becomes for people to say, well, look, I told you, women are not capable. I promoted. Did you promote the right person? Or did you promote a person in a right situation? So it's very risky things, and I admire women who take these risky positions. Some time ago, I read this example of a store I used to go, J.C. Penney.
Yeah, I think it's also here. I'm not
J.C.
sure.
Penney, I think it's American, like Macy's and like Eaton's, in Canada. It's equivalent to like Eaton or Bay store. So J.C. Penney, and I think they were going to get bankrupt. They were in debt. So at that point, they brought in women to deal with the problem. And that probably did not go well. But another, example I could give you is of Xerox. They were in a very bad situation. They were in debt, and they brought in women. It's about 10, 15 years ago. And this woman managed things very nicely, was able to make Xerox come back on its own feet. So there are exceptions, but majority time you will see that, women are promoted. I mean, women should be promoted. There should not be glass ceiling. If you are doing normal thing, they will be promoted, right? But when things don't go well, and then you suddenly put women in a top position, and if they fail, then it's a risky situation. When they fail, there are two things that it's like all women, that supports that notion that women can't handle, as well as no one pays attention that it was a bad situation to begin with.
Well, perfect. Thank you, Professor Varma, for all your answers. And I think it's been quite a long interview, so I guess we'll finish it off here. Again, thank you for coming on. Thank you to our listeners for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you everyone for tuning in to listen. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we did during the interview.
If you liked this episode, learned something, or just want to help out a bunch of students, please leave a review, write a comment, and share this on social media. If you are listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe and write to us in the comments.
All the books and other resources recommended by the interviewee are in the podcast description/video description depending on your platform, and depending on when you see this, you might be able to use our affiliate link to purchase them.
The Marianopolis Addendum podcast is actively seeking local sponsors here in Montreal, so if you are interested, please contact us at the email linked in the description. All the profit generated by this podcast will go back to fund our club's activity. If we have any surplus, they will be donated at the end of every month to a local charity.
This episode was edited by Jessica.
And the artwork is done by Camilla Huang.
The producers and guests associated with this episode may express their opinion, but this podcast does not support any political parties. We only aim to bring different perspectives on different issues through the free exchange of opinions and ideas.
We look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast. Cheers!